Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and enjoying your way through the 50 most relevant players, at least in my opinion, for the 2022 Fantasy Footy pre-season. Today, talking about a fascinating guy at number 22, Hawthorn's James Sicily. It's been a couple of days since we've had this panelist on the podcast. We had to get him back. I've got Kane. Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well, MJ. James Sicily. We haven't been able to talk about him for a little while. I remember doing a podcast with you back in 2020. Yeah. We were saying to trade him before his bye because he was in such a good vein of form that he was as top dollar as you can ever get, especially in that SuperCoach format. The stuff he was doing at that time, I think he'd just come off scores of 132, 149 and 164. Oh. So unfortunately, we know a couple rounds later in round 12 back in 2020, he did have that ACL injury against West Coast.
Yeah.
We didn't see him for the rest of 2020, obviously. We didn't even see him at all in 2021. Positive is he's had plenty of time to rehab that knee.
It's true.
He's had plenty of time to hopefully, ingratiate himself in Sam Mitchell's new look Hawthorn outfit.
Yes.
Obviously, Sam's had plenty of time over the years to think about how to best use Sicily, because I think we all know as fantasy coaches, the usage of Sicily, like a lot of players, but maybe him more than others, is a really important factor in what his scoring is. So I'm really excited to dive into him.
Yeah, he's a fascinating player for us to look at. 27 years of age. So he's a little older than you might have think. Just had a birthday a few weeks ago. Defender eligible. There's no 2021 data to look at, so we'll skip right past that. But you did allude to one of those really big monster scores that he's had earlier. His career score ever in SuperCoach was in 2020. It was a 163 against the Swans. Well, it was just a couple of years earlier in AFLFantasy and DreamTeam in 2018. It was a 135 against the Bombers. In SuperCoach, Fantasy and DreamTeam, because he did miss last year, he has been awarded a reasonably substantial discount. He's going to be priced at just under $450K in SuperCoach, $510,000 in AFL Fantasy, and $473,700 in DreamTeam. You're right, Kane. He missed all of 2021 and big chunks of 2020 due to that ACL injury. But when James Sicily is at his best, this is the type of player we're dealing with. We will dive into his fantasy history in a second, but he is one of the best intercept players in the game. The way he reads that ball in flight is just remarkable. He finds a way to get third man up and really almost redefined that intercept role 3, 4, 5 years ago. He's redefined what it means to be an intercept defender. Certainly it's now very much a Jake Lever league, but he was almost kind of the leading indicator more so than even what Lever was at that time. He's an elite kick, a really good contested mark. The Hawks previously had loved getting the ball into his hands, rebounding out of 50. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But sometimes we just forget, and I know we've said that a few times throughout this podcast series, Kane, but these guys that are coming back off injuries, sometimes recency bias, we just forget the elite quality of footballer that James Sicily is, and he absolutely is an elite footballer.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it there. He's elite at two skills that, personally, I think you want in the back half. He's an elite interceptor, reads the ball really well in flight, and can stop other people clearly scoring by doing so. But also, he's got this kick. When you think of a Jake Lever, again, great interceptor, great defender, but that's not his other skill set to dispose of the ball and really create by foot. That's what Sicily can do. He can really bite off those kicks, execute those kicks that open up the game. So that's, that helps him in multiple ways in fantasy. One, they're very happy giving him the ball. They're happy to do a sideways kick and let him observe and set up the play. And then we know from a SuperCoach point of view, not only is he getting a boost for the intercepts, the defensive actions that he's doing, but when you're using the ball well, when you're hitting targets and you're launching scores, we know that SuperCoach gold. And that's why, he does have usually a 10 to 15 point increase on his DT to his SuperCoach.
Yeah.
And that's why he can produce these massive ceiling games, MJ, because when he's going well, when he's taking contested intercept marks, when he's launching these attacks, when he's spoiling, like there is legitimate ceiling, particularly in SuperCoach, but even in DT, you know, there's 120 plus scores. You think about, again, we know we can't wait for a couple of years and we don't have to look back at 2020, but in 2020, in the shortened games, he produced a 114 in DT. Like that's getting up 140 plus.
Yeah, in the shortened
and
games.
It's done exactly how you'd want a defender to do it. 17 kicks, 11 handballs, 14 marks.
Wow.
MJ, he didn't lay a tackle in that game and he's produced a 140. So that's the type of stuff that you go, okay, yeah, that's a guy that he's not just getting uncontested, easy sort of junk marks, the marks that you'd often say for players you do worry about if they get any attention, and he has got attention.
Yes.
You know, you look at that Giants game, the round prior to dropping the 114 in 2020, he got some attention from Daniel Lloyd. So coaches, opposition coaches know that he is a very damaging player. And that's where you get this insane volatility.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing is we're not paying at peak price. Now, clearly we're not paying at peak price for some really key reasons that we have to address. You mentioned the ACL. We can't just expect a guy, and maybe he will get back to his best, but we can't just expect a guy to look and go, he's pretty much been an 85 to 90 DT guy the 3 years he's played previously, and he's been a 90 to 105 guy in SuperCoach. You can't have that expectation, but when you've got the price that you're paying for built in, you don't have to. So how do you evaluate that risk? The other thing when you dive in deeper is, like we touched on, some of these averages where he's gone at 105, there's games built in there where he has been swung forward.
And he scores terribly there. Yeah.
And he scores really poorly. So if you look a little bit deeper and you go, geez, there's been seasons where he's gone half a year, 110. And then for whatever reason, typically it's, you know, Hawthorn behind, chasing the game. We've got to kick goals. No point.
Don't have a tall presence, or we need some kind of X factor.
We need some, exactly. We need an X factor. We need a game changer, and that's him. The thing that I hope when I look at the Hawthorn team that gives me some encouragement that he can settle in defence as opposed in the forward line is I look at their guys that can play forward, and you look at their tools as a whole, right? You've got Ben McAvoy, captain in previous years.
Ruck forward at best.
Aging, you know, he's in his low 30s now. Then you start thinking about, so who are some of the other guys that they could use? You know, we know they've got Lynch and Reeves. They're really pure rucks though, aren't they? They're not really guys. Now, will they go a 2-ruck setup? We know McAvoy is very versatile. Can play on all 3 lines. But I look at some of the next gen they've got coming through. Mitch Lewis is currently 23. You know, he's got 36 games under his belt. Emerson Jekker, they gave a couple games to last year. He's 20. Kazitsky got a couple of games last year. He's 21. And then they've got this guy, Jackson Callow, that all reports...
Mid-season draft,
is really impressing in what he's going to do. So that's 4 guys that are 195 centimetres plus.
It's a lot of tall forwards.
It's a lot of tall forwards in an age bracket where you hope with the competition for spots in that team, you can find 2 of them. And if you find 2 of them,
you're away.
You're in pretty good shape. And also, MJ, they've got time to find them. Like, there's not a need to go, in my mind, let's get a 28-year-old because we've got a little bit more chance. Like, you need to find another batch. You need to find another crew. Whereas I look in the back line and you go through and you know, Granger Barras, high draft pick. Again,
it'll take some time, but he'll get there.
Looks all the making, has a lot of the skills that Sicily has aerially, which is great. But then you look at some of the others and you go, Hardigan and Frost. Now, Frost is 28. He's probably got a few more years. He can purely play that lockdown. Don't worry about the ball. Just worry about your man, one-on-one. And Hardigan can do the same thing. So they've got a couple there. But after that, MJ, there's not really anyone.
There's no tall presence outside of those.
Yeah, like a Will Day is, he's 189 centimeters. So he's on the taller side. But, you look at his build, the way he plays.
You don't want him playing that accountable role.
No, he plays more like a running player. So for me, I look at that team and I say, you settle this guy in defence. You also throw in the forward line, MJ. You've got the leadership of Gunston. You've got the leadership of Bruce. You hope they get some time to nurture these guys and they can still play some good footy, no doubt, especially if Gunston has recovered from that injury that's kept him sidelined for much of the last few years. But I think if you're building that back line with the guy that's 27, in Sicily, you hope that a Granger Brass comes through. Frost is 28. Again, he plays a very specific
gap
role.
For a little bit of time.
and you balance the list. So for mine, I don't see that need to throw him forward. Again, there's always a possibility in game because he has that skill set. You spoke about it with Ridley. When you've got versatility, whether it's, playing in defense, a lockdown role or a rebounding role, or in Sicily's case, being a traditional swingman where you can just throw them forward, like that's always going to be part of his game. And that's always a big risk at any point in the season. It doesn't matter if he's, the number one interceptor in the competition. If there's a game to be won, he's a chess piece that a coach can always
100%.
use. So it's a risk you're always going to run. But again, at this price, it seems like at a minimum, if you're paying 50s, I feel like you're comfortably getting 20. You're getting 20 points upside. Now, is that enough is probably the bigger question.
That is the bigger question. So in AFL Fantasy, he's priced with the discount there around the marker of the guys that are in that mid-50s range. So arguably in that format, that's the one where you probably feel the most comfortable, not just because you've got the 2 trades a week, use or lose, although SuperCoach and Dream Team have had now an increase of their trades available to them. For me, I just look at that and go, man, if you need that sort of mid-range guy, he's going to give you a 75 to 80 coming off the back of an ACL and with some uncertainties in that back line comfortably. So that format for me feels like a real simple equation. Dream Team a little bit more pricey, but not too much. He's in that low 60s again, very, very similar. And we'll talk about what are the markers and indicators coaches should look for to be able to confirm whether or not Sicily's their guy. And then it's the lower 80s in SuperCoach again. He's historically 100, 105 sort of guy in that format, where he's around about that 90 range, give or take a couple of spots in Dream Team and Fantasy. What I love about him is I don't see a world where they move him forward outside of the in-game variance, whether it be injury or dynamic. You're right. There are a couple of things that I think coaches have some level of concern about him, because we could go through the 2018, 2019, 2020 soars and see massive tons, consistent 90s, consistent 80s. But it's a new coach, it's a new era, and he's coming off the back of an ACL. We talked about it in the Jared Witts podcast. I think you might have been on it with me, where we knew that there is always going to be a level of scoring regression for players coming off an ACL, especially key position players. Sicily's not your pure key position player, but the thing that might give coaches some level of optimism is he was pretty much ripe and ready to go from October last year. So normally an ACL player is getting an interrupted preseason and finally getting right in this sort of time frame of the year. Whereas for Sicily, he's been injury-free throughout the whole preseason. So he's able to have that chance to build that continuity and confidence back into his body, albeit not in a pure AFL sense. I think the biggest uncertainty I have, Kane, I'm keen on your take on this, is how the heck does this Hawthorn backline look? Not just from a Tools perspective, but last year they developed and emerged a couple of different guys that are all really interesting prospects. Giath almost took the Sicily role last year as the interceptor and as one of the key footballing distributors. He's a little bit more run and carry than what Sicily is, but he's through there. Jack Scrimshaw has always been mooted as the future Grant Birchall that came from Gold Coast as that beautiful left foot penetrating kick. Lockie Bramble was one of their kind of top up players from last year that found a role across the back pocket and halfback, and fantasy coaches certainly remember him fondly last year with some really nice scores to the back of the year. Will Day, another really classy ball user that has been mooted to maybe move up onto the wings, but we've already talked about he's elite user of the ball by foot. And then you've got a Jarman Impey, who again is another run and carry player coming back off a serious injury. But you've got kind of in this combination of 6 guys, all of them you probably would want to build a case to say, we would like them in our best 22. Then Sicily coming in, who's certainly the senior of them and arguably better at the marking and the kicking components. And that's no shade on those blokes. It's just a compliment to how good Sicily is. How is this mouths to feed approach? Could it work? Because that's the only hesitancy I really have about really committing to James Sicily.
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism in that group, MJ. You have to be quite, feeling quite good about that group if you're a Hawthorn fan. And, a few of them have played across different lines. We know Impey's spent time in the forward line in the past, in his former time at Port Adelaide and even sometimes at Hawthorn. We know Bramble started there, then got that shift. So personally, I don't think those type of things impact Sicily too much. He's also never really been a dominant kick-in player. That's the thing that always worries you as well. You hate when there's a guy that has a lion's share, loses the lion's share. Like, that's going to be a big issue. Whereas, Hardwick has sort of always been that guy that takes a lot of the kick-ins. So, maybe he could eat into that. Maybe he couldn't. But I think for what he's actually done in the past, you're not really relying on the kick-ins.
No.
I think, this is a guy, James Sicily, that as time of recording, there's discussion that he's in the mix for the captaincy. So this is a guy that, and again, you can't say this about a lot of guys at his price. He is best 22. He is best handful at the club. So he is super important. I've gone through what I believe is the depth they have in his position, and it's not great. I think they've got two stoppers in Hardigan and Frost. They've got a guy in Granger Barras who, what he did at a junior level and what he showed at times last year, looks talented, but he's also his second season. So we can't expect a heat for him. Those other guys, I think they're the ones that are fighting each other out. It's Giath, it's Impey, it's Day, it's Bramble. And again, I think at their best, they're all in the team.
Yes.
Now, you can't have 5 running halfback flanks when we've already mentioned, Blake Hardwick is also a lock in that team. So someone's going to have to find a new role. I don't think it's Sicily. Now, the hard thing with Sicily is, when he was having those good seasons, Hawthorn were a better team in terms of where they were on the ladder.
Finals and things of that nature.
Again, some people might say, hey, Kane, North Melbourne won the spoon. Aaron Hall was one of the best players for the year. The ball's going to be coming in a lot.
That's true.
Maybe that helps. But again, it really does come down to game plan. And some of the stuff I've heard about Sam Mitchell is the desire to play attractive football. He thinks that there is an importance on actually playing the game the right way. Obviously, winning is really important, but from a fan point of view, from a spectator point of view, from just a football appreciation point of view, playing the right way. So for me, that doesn't lend itself to a ball possession chip.
Yeah.
But again, until you see it, until you see how it structures up, and clearly if that happens, that game plan suits Sicily.
Yeah, it does.
It is hard to make a living as a scorer if you're crashing into packs, taking intercept marks. Like, that's a big toll. You think about the guys that are the best defenders, Lloyd, Doherty in the past.
Whitfield, like these outside.
Space. You need some easy stuff because they're just not going to get the tackle count, MJ. If you're going to go against these mids that are putting up anywhere between 5 to 10 tackles a game, you're 20 to 40 points off the pack to get to 100. So you have to do it easier. So he has to have those mark games. For mine, I think you put him at 20 to 30 points value.
Yep.
You leave him there and you think, okay, what else is going on? Can I find a guy cheaper that can score the same? Do I need to find more cash and go above him and get to a guy that might only be 15 points higher? But you know what? From what he's averaging now, he'll be a fringe top 6. I think he's a guy that's really safe where we sit right now. Before we've seen any JLT, we've barely even seen match sims coming out, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
I think you put him in the team. It's safe. You're getting some value.
True.
I don't think you can have the expectation, though, and this is where it probably does come back to AF. Now, we know there's been some rule changes in the last couple of days that maybe do make it easier to move on to Sicily and have him as a cash grab. And the good thing I will say about using him as a stepping stone is there is enough ceiling to create enough cash. You think about if you can string together, you think about a guy like Tex Walker last year played this role for a lot of people.
That's right.
The price range is awkward. It's an uncomfortable price range. And Sicily is maybe a little bit more than that. But if you can go big, you can generate 150K
very quickly
in a couple of weeks. Yeah. And all of a sudden, not only have you netted some big points, you've also got some cash to play. And especially with Sicily, if you can get off at the right times, history shows he will go up, he will go down. Yeah. So I think using your rule that just is so right for these type of guys, you have to start with him or leave him alone. If you don't start with him and he goes 120 to start the season, maybe you have a chance to get on and ride it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sure.
But then again, we always come back to him. Do you want to use a trade to bring the guy in
And
then you use a trade to have to trade him back out. So,
Yeah.
and even if it's out with 120K up your sleeve, it just gets a bit messy for mine. So I think he's a guy that you feel pretty comfortable. It's going to be 70 plus in DT. I know that doesn't sound super exciting, but I think what you're paying, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's a possibility for 80, 85.
Yep. Which would be awesome.
In SuperCoach, there's probably, a floor of 80.
Which is what you're paying for now. Yeah.
High of 99. Yeah. So I think it just feels like it's a nice placeholder. It's not going to ruin your structure. You've got an option there to move up or down.
Yeah. I agree.
But it is really hard when you've got a guy with proven history
and big ceiling.
But we do have this injury. So that's where your risk appetite, can you convince yourself of someone else is probably more what I'm saying. Is there someone you can go, you know what? For this range, I like this. Like he's going up against your Rouse, your Caldwells, MJ, isn't he?
At that
when you think about that.
Yeah.
So that's where you got to compare across all lines. Like we say, like in a salary cap game, it's not just 1-for-1 back v back.
Not at all.
It's this and that. So I think he's a guy that you feel comfortable with. You watch the preseason. And again, like most things, the cows will determine how many of these guys you can have.
That's right.
But I think you have to watch. You can't be turned off. Again, some people put a line through him because of the ACL, and that's cool. I think when you have value that it's created like this and he's in the 50s and 60s and he's best 22, you just keep your ear to the ground and see, and maybe just have a bit of a backup plan if things go pear-shaped in terms of an injury or some word up. But for now, I haven't heard anything that says put a line through this guy, and I haven't heard anything that says, best shape ever, dominating this, dominating that, intercepting role, will take kick-ins. Like, you start ticking those things, you start watching for those things. That's what you're looking for. All we can do is talk about the information we have at the time. And, we're not going to just be stubborn. If they come out and say he's struggling, well, we change. If
we move. You look to
fire,
the Hewitts, you look to the others, you do that stuff. Yeah.
No problem changing our mind. We do it all the time in fantasy. But for right now, what we have, scoring history,
tick,
ACL, and a guy that, as we speak, is doing everything asked of him in the preseason.
Yeah, that's all we can absolutely expect from him right now. So it'll be fascinating to see a continued strong preseason. We'll absolutely have him right in the equation for starting squads across all the formats. Drafts are interesting about where he goes. He's certainly got some scoring volatility, and injuries do drop people away. And not everyone drafts off rankings and tiers. There are some that just draft purely off projected averages that formats might supply. And so everybody and every coach has a different drafting strategy. Historically, he was a D1 in SuperCoach and a D1, D2 in Dream Team and Fantasy. You're not going to have to draft him at these points, although if you get lucky, he could absolutely return back to those heights. I think if you really want James Sicily, like you're desperate to own him this year in drafts, D3 is about as late as you can wait on him. D4 is, for me, the sweet spot of if he fell in my lap at D4, I would be very happy to take him at that point. But if you go, no, I want to own Sicily this year, that's okay. D3 is where you got to go for him. So that's kind of right towards the back of those single digit rounds, maybe around 10, 11, 12, if depending on how it works, but somewhere in there, the late 9, 10, 11, that's the space that if you really want that D3 and you want it to be Sicily, he won't slide to too many D4s. Where are you taking him on draft day, Kane?
Yeah, these type of guys, they're always interesting from a draft strategy point of view because the downside is you actually can really replace these guys off the waiver wire. Like if you're getting him at a D3, MJ, if you're saying, just say he's in that 25 to 30th defender range, the upside is that he nearly pushes into a top 10 defender. If things really click and he's going 90, he's up there with your Shorts and your Dawsons and these type of guys. So as you said there, the key is your timing of it. If you can get him and you put the number at, say, and this is where it's a bit different for draft, I'd probably put the number about 80, because if he struggles for an injury point of view, or if he just tapers off to a 70, he's still usable on the field. And with the volatility of his scoring and how most leagues are set up now to handle COVID and schedule changes, it's very easy to loophole him with someone else.
Yeah, it is.
And we always talk about, like, it's not hard to find defenders that can give you a 65, 70,
No.
especially with the way these matchups shake out. So I'd rather take him a little bit earlier and think, well, if it all clicks and he just ticks along beautifully, I could get an 85, 90 guy.
And
if it goes pear shape, well, it's not really a massive deal because I can get a 65, 70 off the waiver wire, or worst case, I'm loopholing him. I'm playing him and another guy with the matchups, loophole. You know, hopefully I cop the hundreds. Hopefully I can maybe avoid some of the 30s or 40s. That's where you do have to favor upside a bit.
Yeah,
because if it comes out, you know, you want to win. That's where I think with salary cap, we get a bit safe. I'll manage it in my trades. I'll shake it out.
Yep.
Whereas in draft, you know, the goal is to win. So you have to weight upside a bit higher. You have to weight the guys that can win it for you. And if you can get this guy when other people are taking 75 to 80 defenders.
Yeah, it's true.
And you think they're, you know, I'll use a guy who I think most people would think he's sort of a boring sort of guy, but he does get it done. You know, Darcy Byrne-Jones.
Yeah.
Now, he's shown a history of it, but I think at this stage people feel, yeah, he's a 70 to 80 most weeks.
Yep.
Like, that's where I'd go, you know what? If it clicks for Sicily with these kick-in rules, you didn't really have much of a chance with that.
Yeah.
Like, you take the upside and you know that if he gets injured, I'll find something on the waiver wire. It's not a big deal. So I think you have to keep in mind these type of guys that can win it for you and can improve, to just take them a little bit earlier, because if it does click, you're on your way. You really are on your way.
Yeah, it's very, very true. Hey, mate, appreciate your work today as we've talked about James Sicily.
No problem, MJ.
If you want to go and read the article on him or any of the other players revealed so far in the 50 most relevant, it is online now for you at coachespanel.tv. You got articles dropping every single day through this 50 most relevant and a bunch of other stuff. There's some team reveals, some cash cow analysis, all the updates of the ultimate footy positions. You can go and check them out while you're there. Everything you need this preseason, we got you covered. Coachespanel.tv. Tomorrow we venture one step closer in to really ending the 20s and the final few weeks of the 50 most relevant. Tomorrow at number 21, I got a guy who's one of the most popular players across all the formats. Chances are, if you were to open up your team right now, you've got him in your side. He's relevant. You don't get to the number 21 without being relevant. But there's a lot of unknowns about this player. And chances are, even though you own him, you've still got some pretty big question marks. Who is he? I'll tell you tomorrow in the 50 most relevant.